And now we hear from the opposition in relation to budget speech. I think the only thing that we've been missing for the last 2 hours is the two Michaels crossing the floor and giving each other a big hug. So much was the love-in between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. And we've heard from Fianna Fáil, the only party to ever produce an alternative budget without a costing, without a figure. And to answer the question that Derek Cleary poses, we were the party that was writing the legislation to bring in rent certainty that their party voted against. We were the party who was developing the motion to end water charges that their party voted against. And we were the party that brought forward the motion during that period that set up the Housing Committee that dealt with the crisis in homelessness and housing, while they were walking in and out of Trinity, drinking cups of tea and passing their times with the buddies in government. During the past few decades, the Irish people have each year had to live with the consequences of budgets drafted by either Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, one or the other, time after time. Now we get both of them in one budget. The politics of the nod and the wink, the politics of short-termism. The cycle of boom and bust, economic collapse, immigration and underinvestment will carry on regardless. In the good years, money was squandered by these very same parties, and in the hard times, it was our families and it was our friends who were asked to pay the cost. But we are told that this is the era of new politics, that things are different now. Then why is it that the government are repeating the same mistakes in this budget as Fianna Fáil governments did in the past? Why is it that they are shrinking the tax base, introducing property tax incentives that will only push up house prices? And why is it that they are relying on vulnerable tax receipts? The answer, might be that many of the same old faces, them same faces that sat in government and led the opposition, the same faces that sacrificed our sovereignty, are still around and are still selling the same old nonsense. They have no new ideas. They just want to go back to the way it was. But the way it was the wrong way. This isn't new politics. This is the same old political parties and the same old failed economics. And we are at a moment of real opportunity. An opportunity where the economy grows, where we can chart a new course, to build a fair economy, to grow employment, to reduce the cost of living, to invest in public services, to deliver tax fairness and invest in our future and our children's future. And today is a missed opportunity. Instead of seizing on that opportunity, what we have is a deal cobbled together, not in the interests of the country, but in the interests of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. What we have is a backroom budget, lacking in vision and failing to learn the lessons of the past. And our people deserve better, our economy deserves better, and for damn sure our country deserves better. Caithir Finchgiel amá go raibh Virginia dú gafa go millteanna leis an mhorú is cleisiú economiachta. Cuirsaí na raibh smaachta go neathrú a dtír siad. De réir Fianna Fáil agus Fine Gael, ní raibh siad ag coir gríomhaíochtaí freigra as an céircéim, ní raibh ag gríomhaíochtaí freigra as an céircéim, ní raibh an ach mí eabh. Seo an bré go le feiceáil mar chuid den budget seo nachtaithe inniu. Bhí na bartas drochara cotha a bheidh acu idir Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael agus a go gairde a bhí in éineacht lá is srút na mála seo. Tíobh thiar den cheisiú bancreachta agus Gaeilgear. Agus a rís tá bhacasáil de a policy seo a níolagah mar chuid de pacas a úr agus a tá cotha as ar góir inniu. This is the first big test of this new government. Come to the end of this debate, when the Dáil backs this budget, the government and Fianna Fáil will doubtably say that they have passed the test. But the test is not about political majorities stitched up in backroom deals. The real test is whether this budget will end the threat of villages in the west of Ireland being flooded because of the lack of flood defences. The real test is whether our older people will no longer be left on trolleys for days on end in our hospitals. The real test is whether the thousands of children who call a hotel room home tonight will have a home because of this budget. When the results of that test are looked at, then the result will be clear. It will be a complete failure. We have been through a lot over the last few years. The most brutal, the most unfair things have been done to the Irish people in the name of saving banks and saving international capital. A generation's hopes and rights were sacrificed. What happened to them was wrong. Austerity was and is a brutal concept that prolonged and deepened the recession. It made tough times not only tougher, but more unfair too. But now in 2016, a century after a group of men and women with a clear and genuine vision of what this country could be and should be, when they struck for Ireland's rights, we here must start rebuilding. We are told that our economy grew by 26% last year. We are told corporation taxes are booming, but yet there are 1,000 families homeless in our capital city. Last week there were on average 376 people on trolleys in our hospital, and there is over 500,000 people on public hospital waiting lists. This is the type of dysfunctional economy that has been built up year after year by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. And the economy should serve the people, not the other way round. This is a government who have time and time again sided with the landlords over the tenants, with the banks over the mortgage holders. A government who has let the insurance industry rip off struggling families while they rewarded the wealthy. A government who has empowered the vultures and began selling our country to them brick by brick, tax-free from beneath our feet. But this budget could have been the budget where we started reducing the cost of living and investing in public services. Today should have been the day where we increased capital spending to an appropriate amount to build the homes, the schools, the health facilities, the flood defences and the roads that our country is crying out for. Budget 2017 should have been where the development of the All-Ireland economy and investment in long economic growth began. But today also should have been about making the tax system fairer. And tax is not something that should be derided. It is part of the social contract that is supposed to be the core basis for a republic. Taxation can and should be used as a tool to deliver fairness, to invest in essential public services and infrastructure. Today in Budget 2017, the Government begins to implement its policy of abolishing the USC. And while Fianna Fáil protest, theirs goes very much close to the same aims. A policy described by the Department of Finance as regressive and which will benefit the wealthier with little or no impact to those on low or middle incomes. Today's cuts amount to €335 million, but the process being put in place will hollow out the tax base of the state by €5.6 billion by 2021. And that is the context in which we need to discuss the steps being advocated today. No credible expert, no advocacy group, no economist believe that this is a sensible policy. Indeed, all of them have argued against it. And these cuts will mean little for the individual struggling on €20,000 per year, getting a mere €190 back per week. The cuts will be little comfort to people facing the cost of living crisis at present, with an average worker on €35,000 getting €330 back a week. And I have no doubt that a few euro off the USC would be welcomed by many, I'm sure, and particularly those that are struggling to get by. But it won't go far when your car insurance quote is suddenly twice what it was last year and the government does nothing. It won't go far when the bank is ripping you off on your mortgage, or when sending your child to third level is the cost of taking out another mortgage. €330 a week is of little use when you're waiting for the Lewis, and it's 20 minutes before one arrives that you can eventually squeeze onto. Or when you're renting a room in town and that the entire rent of that room was more than your parents paid on their mortgage for a house in the suburbs. These people who are struggling to get by day in and day out are better served by investing the €5.6 billion that this government plans to cut in taxes over the lifetime of this government into the services that we all use, into the services that keeps the country running and working. Tackling those issues requires vision, and that is not something that Fine Gael or indeed Fianna Fáil do. They do gimmicks, they do short-termism, they do tax breaks. But thankfully, public opinion has not swallowed the lie that the abolition of the USC is possible or even desirable. Make no mistake about it, despite having to rein in their swagger this year, both Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are determined to give the wealthy tax breaks at the expense of public services and ordinary workers. It is clear to be seen in their manifestos. That is their short, medium and long-term policy. It is reckless, it is dangerous, and they know it. And it is deeply dishonest for any party to continue carving out the tax base while saying that they will make the investment that this country needs. It is simply not possible. It is a cynical Féin approach that Fianna Fáil were the masters of during the 90s and noughties, and that has served us poorly in the past and will serve us poorly now. I sat through the banking inquiry, Minister, where we heard of the ever-increasing reliance that was placed on stamp duty during that period. And then, when construction disappeared, when it stalled, when it eventually crashed, the stamp duty disappeared, wreaking havoc to our finances. But it's not stamp duty that's vulnerable anymore, it's the corporation tax receipts. 40% of corporation tax receipts were paid by 10 companies in 2015. And this illustrates the rising vulnerability of the total tax revenue of the affairs of a number of small companies. In 2015, corporation tax payments from the top 10 companies amounted to 6% of our overall tax take. That's the same proportion as equated for stamp duty just before the bust. We are going down a dangerous road, and it seems no amount of warning, either from me, from Sinn Féin, from economists, from the Central Bank, from the IMF, from the European Commission, will convince this coalition government that this is a bad way to go. But the most unfair tax break that this government introduces today, one that has been celebrated by Fianna Fáil, is the capital acquisition tax. So a tax change that will benefit only 2,000 people, each of them who have already inherited €280,000 tax-free, will be allowed to inherit an additional 30,000 tax-free, will cost the Irish taxpayer just under €20 million. So let me put your political choices in context, Minister. Last week in this House, you on the government side, supported by Fianna Fáil, voted against the Sinn Féin motion to roll out 24-hour 7-care for those in need of treatment of mental health. It would cost €20 million to bring that provision in. So can I ask you, Minister, can I ask Fianna Fáil, why is it that you believe that these 2,000 individuals who have already had a tax-free windfall of €280,000 deserves a tax write-off of €20 million, yet the people who are suffering from mental health, people who have suicidal tendencies, who want to reach out to services either at night or at weekend, but the services are not there for them, why do you decide to prioritise those individuals against those suffering from mental health? And that is the question that you need to answer, because we hear all the platitudes, we hear all of the right words when we discuss the issue, but when it comes down to brass tacks, when it comes down to making political choices, you fail again. The government chief whip, in rejecting our motion, said, "We don't have the magic calculator that Sinn Féin obviously possesses." Minister, can I tell you, it's not the calculator that is broken in this government, it is your sense of right or wrong. I don't know if you read, Minister, your own department strategy papers, and I doubt it, because if you did know, you would know, and it was very clear, that there was no dramatic tax yield or economic activity as a result of a reduction of CGT. Yet this is what you propose again in this year's budget. Your own tax papers say that tax yield and economic activity are not increased overall, but simply moved in time as a result of a reduced rate in CGT. And then many assets were cashed in only after the reduction, in full knowledge that less tax will be paid. But again, Fine Gael resort to norm, which is cut taxes at the expense of taking the harder options in terms of making our country more competitive. The move to increase the self-employed tax credit is a measure that we welcome. My party, as you know, would have gone further, increasing it to €1,300. This is a fairness issue, and I am deeply disappointed by the Minister's announcement today that he is dragging the feet on this issue. The tax credits, like many others, should be tapered off so that there is no open-ended gain for the high earners in society. There are other issues in the budget that are to be found in the Sinn Féin's alternative budget, and where the government has done the right thing, and we will support those measures in making sure that they are actually implemented. But can I turn to, for just one moment, the issue of what you call the Help to Buy scheme, or the first-time buyers grant? There is no Help to Buy or Help the First-Time Buyers scheme in this budget. There is a Help the Bank scheme, there is a Help the Builder scheme. It was first proposed, a version of it, by Fianna Fáil at their Ardèche in 2015, and it is taken directly from the Fianna Fáil's guide, How to Wreck the Economy. It has been slammed, absolutely slammed, by anybody who has looked at the idea. It has failed miserably when the Tories introduced it just across the water. We all know what will happen as a result of this move. It will lump further debt onto young families, and it sums up this budget. It is about old, failed ideas dressed up as new ones. What part of the supply and demand rules does the government not get? The Minister again says that this will increase demand, so therefore supply will increase. Minister, demand is out there. You may not have recognised, but we have a housing crisis. The demand is there, and all you are doing is putting fuel on the fire in relation to the demand, which will do nothing but increase prices. Of course, people out there, and I can see it, I can see the attraction of this if I was buying a home, but overall this scheme is ill thought out, and we know that house prices will follow the credit available, as we know. And I urge you to drop this reckless proposal, and I put it to Fianna Fáil, who say that they're not in support of it. If they're not in support of it, it's not going to fly. It's not going to happen because it requires legislation to be introduced, and it is a reckless proposal, and if Fianna Fáil belatedly accepts that, then that is something to be welcomed. Minister, there has been much talk of Brexit in the budget, and we need to recognise that there are many issues outside of our control, but there are areas where we can influence the effects of Brexit, and they go far beyond just our taxation policy. That is why Sinn Féin has many months ago proposed an All-Ireland Forum, and that we get all the partners in to discuss the way forward. We have known Brexit is happening for 4 months now, yet the forum has yet to be convened. What is the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil answer to Brexit? It seems from today's announcement that it's tax cuts, and that's simply not good enough. That's a lazy and cynical approach. The far more fundamental point that this government seems to miss time and time again is that Brexit is so damaging because it compounds partition. That's a word that actually had to be deleted from the Budgetary Committee report on the suggestion of Fianna Fáil, because we're not supposed to mention partition in these houses. For this country, partition is a problem. A Brexit of Britain without the north of our country would be far less daunting prospect. That is why policies that tackle the damage of partition and undermine partition itself must be supported in response to Brexit. And that is why we need increased funding for the north-south bodies and for capital projects. The best defence that we as a country can have to any downturn, whether triggered by Brexit or anything else, is to have made the investment in our infrastructure. And that is why Sinn Féin has proposed front-loading €1.2 billion of capital spending, using the flexibility allowed within the fiscal rules. But once again, the government has come up short. Every budget, Minister, and you'll know this from previous years, throws up new issues or something unprecedented. This year, the Minister for Finance is ignoring his own revenue commissioners. The same revenue commissioners where he defended so vigorously when it came to deals with multinationals, when he said that we cannot under any circumstances take the €13 billion that we are due from Apple, because that would be a slight on the revenue commissioners. And you said, what would it be worth a finance minister not defending his revenue commissioners? But today you tell us that increasing excise duties on a packet of cigarettes by 50 cents will bring in €65 million. We'll have to vote on this before midnight, but the revenue commissioners actually say, and this is available for anybody to look on the website and through numerous parliamentary questions and through costings that are provided to us, that this move could cost up to €44 million. Now, Minister, if that transpires, that is a gap in your budget of €109 million. So why is it, Minister, that you don't believe the revenue on this issue? Your department refers opposition parties to the revenue reckoner, yet the Minister can ignore it when it seems convenient. He's also determined, and it's very clear in this, to cobble together things to raise money to cover your USC fixation. And you just want to simply ignore what the people who collect the tax say. It is pulling a fast one, Minister, in the view of the evidence that we have. Minister, you've brought in a wide range of poorly thought-out tax breaks, and it echoes the days of Charlie McCreevy. And I fear that the make-up for the tax forgone you have envisaged is some bit of a wishful thinking. As I mentioned, in relation to the revenue from cigarettes, it is dodgy figures. But your claim that an additional 50 revenue staff plus some new equipment will bring in 50 million extra revenue. Now, I've been long calling for this issue. We were the first to raise it. We've proposed it year after year. But to think that that type of investment would yield that type of return is very, very optimistic. You claim that clamping down on Section 110 companies and abuse of funds will bring in another €50 million. Yet, Minister, just a couple of months ago you didn't even know that this was happening, or so you claim. It was only after we brought it to your attention that funds were buying up Ireland tax-free and that Section 110s were buying up distressed debt tax-free that you actually moved on this issue. When I asked your department how much these changes would bring in, they told us that they had no idea. So where does the €50 million come from? You say that clamping down on offshore tax evasion would bring in €30 million. Again, I welcome the principle. It's something we've long advocated for, but one can only wonder why it's taken so long. But I believe the figure is also wishful thinking, if not just a wild guess. And are you telling us that there's no crossover between any three of these measures? The principles here are solid, there's no doubt about that, and long overdue, but the figures seem a bit fluffy. Perhaps your commitment to slash taxes means you had to use a little bit of imagination on the other side of the balance sheet. Minister, this is a budget where the government and Fianna Fáil parties have finally admitted that they're simply giving up on the public health system. It is to be run down, healthcare is to be something for the better off, and the measly increases today that will not sustain our hospitals or in clinics of the state. We heard a lot about the billion, Pascal, and then it was £500 million additional. And then when we go into the bowels of the document, we see actually it's about £260 million additional. And then when we look at the individual measures that are there to deal with the crisis we have in emergency departments and the fact that we have 530,000 people on waiting lists, we actually find out, well, the winter initiative is £40 million additional and the waiting list is £15 million additional. €55 million to deal with this crisis in our accident emergencies and hospital waiting lists. And just let's look at the hospital waiting lists. €15 million for 530,000 people on hospital waiting lists, people in pain, people waiting month after month, some of them running into years, waiting for treatment, and you give more to 2,000 people on a tax break than you will invest in the 530,000 people that want access to our public system. There is not enough money in this budget to keep our health system operating, even at its critically overloaded state in 2017. The reliance on the National Treatment Purchase Fund shows up in bright lights that there is no vision and that the idea of a universal public service from Fine Gael or indeed Fianna Fáil is dead and gone. And Sinn Féin have shown how this budget could have started to build a health service fit for the 21st century and accessible by all. We would have combined a real additional investment, both in capital and current, of €600 million. That would reopen 500 additional hospital beds. They would provide for the nurses and the doctors to look after citizens who need them. It would begin to build a world-class mental health system and would reform and resource our suicide prevention strategy. From maternity care to empowering people with disabilities to dental care provision, a universal health system could have started today. But the vision to start that work does not exist on the other side of the House. Today you announce €150 million extra for capital investment in housing. Once again, you failed to recognise the extent of the crisis and the resources that are required to address that crisis. In our alternative budget, Sinn Féin has called for an additional investment of €491 million of capital in the delivery of more social housing units. That is more than 3 times what is in your plan. When are the resources going to match the rhetoric that we often hear from you, Taoiseach? In 2001, you as Taoiseach pledged to end homelessness by 2016, this year. In December 2014, after the tragic death of Jonathan Corrie, only metres from here, you said, Taoiseach, I believe the best way to honour Mr Corrie is by acting once and for all on the issue of homelessness. Last year, when I said that your budget would not solve the homelessness crisis and indeed would make it worse, you heckled me. Yesterday, the state had 4,000 adults and over 2,300 children in emergency accommodation. That is your failure. That is your legacy. And what you have done today is show that you are not willing to put the resources required to address that crisis. The Action Plan for Housing, while better than its predecessor, lacks ambition and the urgency necessary to put a stop to homelessness. Sinn Féin have shown you how you could invest an additional €491 million into building houses, but you refuse to listen. And one of the biggest cost of living expenses is the issue of rents. We know in Dublin that they're increasing by about €40 per week. We have fought hard in Sinn Féin for rent certainty. We have produced the legislation. Unfortunately, you and Fine Gael, for whatever reason, indeed supported by Fianna Fáil, voted against our rent certainty bill. And what has that meant? That has cost families thousands of euros in rent. In certain parts of Dublin, rents are increasing by over €2,000 per year. So this bill, this legislation, which you voted against, would have reduced the cost of living for thousands of renters while providing certainty for landlords and would have prevented many families from becoming homeless. On the issue of older people, and we've been treated with a long debate in relation to this in the lead-up to this budget. In my view, it does a great disservice to the older people to be lumped together and told that they'll be looked after at some time in the future. For those pensioners in most need, Sinn Féin would have put €5.70, and we would have made that available for the 1st of January 2017. No ifs, no buts. Practical, targeted measures are needed. We would have also reinstated the transitional state pension. We would have increased fuel allowance by 3 weeks. We would introduce the bereavement grant at €600. We would have extended the Warmer Home Scheme. We would have increased home health provision by 1 million hours, and we would have increased home care packages by 10%. A total funding package for older citizens of €410 million from the first day of January 2017. That is what a well thought out, a properly resourced package for older people looks like. Instead, this government thinks it can buy pensioners off by €5 a week. To add injury to insult, you say that they'll have to wait for it. But you all sat over at the cabinet table earlier on today, and I ask you, did you collectively blush when you decided that the pensioners and others would have to wait until March, yet the TDs and ministers will have no wait to see their increase in their pay next year? Same. Each TD will see their pay increase rise by €2,700 by April 2017, and the same again the following January. But that's small beer, and you well know it, when it comes to considering what you're going to get, Taoiseach, because you're going to get a whopping €14,650 over the next 3 years. And the minister beside you, Mr Donoghue and Mr Noonan, who signed off on this deferment of the social welfare payments, are both going to get €11,735 of an increase. Yet pensioners have to wait, and we're told somehow we should celebrate this. There is an alternative. There's an alternative to the bad habits. There's an alternative, and it's about reducing the cost of living. It's about investing in public services. It's about resourcing an adequate capital plan to build our homes, our schools, our health facilities, our flood defences, our roads that the country needs. The answer to Brexit is the creation of an all-Ireland economy through long-term investment. The alternative is fair taxation. That means abolishing the water charges and the local property tax. And on that subject, let's note that there is not one penny provided in this budget to abolish water charges beyond the 31st of March 2017. Not 1 cent of the €58 million that is required is being provided in this budget. Yeah, Fianna Fáil are signed up to it, that they have agreed to it. It is very difficult for us to figure out which way Fianna Fáil is on this issue day in and day out. But please somebody clarify how Fianna Fáil, who says that they are the champions of abolishing water charge, has signed up to a budget that doesn't provide a penny to abolish water charges. Please somebody clarify that. Ar tíimid go bhfuil léadú don nuaimh an géadar budget na Gaeilge an Gaeltart agus na Helen, agus na dearm mo déanta ar an Gaeilge ríist.
Maha's budget da 1.3 billion euro ach maran is gan 4 million a larige conrún na Gaeilge ar son forest na Gaeilge agus údras na Gaeltarte. Le hé Claire in Eshiart da Hakadu mar a bhí Malta os gan ortmo agriarte Gaeilge is Gaeltarte. Éliú Cotham is mathra a bhíon agus é tastal ó grúpi at Alwarna dar sahi agus dar Gultar agus tugtar neabhairs dífa a rís and budget seo. It should have been provided, and it should still be provided in relation to the proposals to go through the Dáil as we deal with the finance bill. Minister, I want to finish by saying we were all told that this time it would be different. We have the warnings from the Central Bank, from the Fiscal Council, from the EU and so on, but the Conservative, old-school politicians, they all know better. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they know better. They think we can go back to the way things were, and that this time it will be different. But it's not different. It's the same old politics, and it's the same old politics that failed us before. This year we have a clearer choice than never before. We have a choice between a policy that invests and strengthens or a policy that returns to the same old ways. Maybe things will go along okay for a while, more and more tax breaks will pop up, they'll be temporary at first and then they'll be permanent. Spending will be willy-nilly, short-term without any plan, and eventually, when the next challenge comes, the whole economy and the country will be left exposed. The health, education, the social system will stagger on with no vision and with only the bare minimum investment. Eventually, these too will be exposed when they are needed most. Minister, and Yaskan Cordia, the people who steer this country straight into the crash are not the people to build a new economy. They are not the saviours. They are the inside men who want the old days back. Well, the old days were wrong, and this budget does not deserve the support of this House.